One more joint in our standard 7 joints in our Wood 1 series. Again, starting with our 7.5-inch stock. Line it up, slice through right next to the line, and now we're ready to begin. Now for the mortise and tenon, they will be both cut, and they will be cut differently from each other. Start with the tenon, and we're going to start with the tenon the same way that we started with the rabbet and the finger joints. Put the other block on it, and strike a line, having made sure that it is finger flush on the end. And then we'll flip it over, do the same thing on the other face. Gonna ring it around and up on the ends, edges. And we've got a ring around this guy. Need to hold the lip flush, and we're gonna measure in 1/3 of the way, which is gonna be 1/4 of an inch, and put a dot, and measure in 1/4 of an inch and put a dot. And then we're gonna come up here and do the same thing up here. Measure in 1/4 of an inch and measure in 1/4 of an inch. And then we can connect the dots. And now we have 1/4 and 1/4 in. That will be waist, so we'll mark this as waist. And then what's left will be the tenon. But we need to do that on the other edge as well as both faces. Measured 1/4 inch in from all of the faces. Now we need to transfer all of those lines to the end, because we're going to have to chop down to those guys, and we're going to end up making what essentially looks like an elongated tic-tac-toe board. That center guy right there is our tenon. Everybody on the outside is waist. All of these guys are waist. So when we're cutting our shoulder, and we'll cut the shoulder just like we did for the rabbet and the dado and the half lap, when we cut what will essentially be sideways, the way it's oriented right now, into the shoulder, you have to be careful not to cut past your floor line, or not to come past your floor line, because as soon as you cut past your floor line, you're now cutting into the tenon. We want to preserve that center guy. This top line down here, so you need to be careful not to cut through this floor line either on this side or on the back side. To cut the next shoulder on the next face, start with the saw in the kerf already that you've made from the previous one to get you started. So angled down a little bit. Sometimes you've already cut down to here and on the back side, but in the middle, if there's any rocking, then you have to go through holding your hand very straight to get the middle out, but not hit the sides anymore. As always, taking our other piece that helps stabilize and rotating it with our workpiece. Now if we've done this correctly and we come around to our last side, we should have 2 kerfs here, and no matter which one we choose, they should be directly opposite from each other. Now with this last one, you have to be very careful not to get carried away with sawing and just chop off your tenon. Let's see how we are. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we've cut the shoulder, and in order to get a sharp fit, when we push the tenon into the mortise, this shoulder line on the bottom here needs to be very sharp and not have any steps where we moved the saw sideways as we were cutting. We need to make sure that it really is just one line that wraps all the way around. And now we can knock off all of this outside stuff now that we've separated these fibers here from the body of our piece. Now, as with the half lap, when we're popping off this waist, we need to be careful, just in case that wood grain is curving into our tenon, that we don't split the tenon. And what we need to do, therefore, is start a little ways away from the tenon. So I would say go maybe halfway. And you want to hold the chisel so that it is straight up and down, going parallel to these guidelines. And you hold it not way up high like it's a dagger. You don't write with your pencil way back here. I mean, if you're shading, perhaps you do. But if you're going to write with a pencil, you hold it down near the tip. So you hold the chisel down near the tip, use your fingertip as the pivot to be able to place the blade precisely where you want it to go. And then you get it vertically, and then you pop it, and you try not to cut into the shoulder here. Same thing on the other side. Notice this one, the split is going away. Interesting. If you can switch hands, this feels a little awkward to me, but if you can switch hands, that will help. Or you could just rotate in the holder. At a certain point, you can just push and be paring it down. And if you need to slice this because you didn't cut all the way with a saw, put it on that shoulder and slice back and forth, being careful not to slice into the tenon that you want to keep. Now, it is important that what's left be as close to a rectangle, not just looking at it at the end, but also looking at it from the sides in the profile, because as it slides into the mortise, if it gets wider going down, you're going to end up splitting your mortise. So you need to have a rectangle all the way around from every perspective. Alright, we have our tenon cut, and now it's time to trace and cut the mortise. This layout, we're going to use this tenon that we just cut as the basis for how big our mortise is going to be for this exercise. But instead of just putting it on here and tracing it, because there's a good chance you'll end up being wonky at a funny angle when we want to have it square, let's do what we did with the rabbet and the half lap and line up one edge and draw a guideline, and that will be the one side of the mortise, and line up the top and draw a shorter line. That's going to be the top of our mortise. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our tenon, let's tilt that, let's put our tenon up against these guys and line them up carefully to make sure that the top is with the top and the left is with the left, and then we can trace the bottom and the right. Alright, and we have our mortise marked where this is now our waist inside here. And it's pretty square. If it's not square, that means that my tenon was a little bit not square, but what that means is that this mortise will match with this tenon in this particular orientation. Now we just need to cut out the waist. Well, that's going to be making an inside cut, and we're going to start by drilling out a hole in order to drill the hole for our scroll saw blade to pass through. Here I've grabbed a scroll saw blade that I'll be using. It is a skinny one. What I need is a drill bit that is bigger than the blade, but smaller than the width of my mortise. So this guy, and I just visually compare them, bigger than that guy, smaller than that guy, and you need to make sure that you don't even touch the lines when you're drilling, because remember, the lines are outside of the waist. The lines need to stay on your workpiece when you're done. So, as always, safety goggles. Place drill point at one end. Make sure that it is between the lines. And if you want to drill a second hole at the other end to help facilitate removal of the waste as you're cutting it, you can do that. Now we can go to the scroll saw and insert the blade and cut out the waste. To make an inside cut on our workpiece, we're going to need to thread the blade through here and make sure that the teeth are pointed down towards the mark that we made on here. In order to do that, we're going to have to take it off the holder, place the holder in the slot with the screw up, and twist with the square wrench that we have in order to loosen it, and then take a look at what direction the teeth are. See, the teeth are angled down towards my left hand. Therefore, I need to make sure that the writing is towards my left hand, and then I can put it back in there. Notice that I did not remove the screw, I just loosened the screw in order to loosen the clamp. Now I need to retighten it and make sure that the blade is lined up with the point of the clamp. So get here and let's see here, there we go. The blade is lined up with the point of the clamp. And now I also need to make sure that when I put it into the table, I can see my writing and that the teeth are angled down towards the table, because I want it to be cutting down into the table, not cutting up and lifting it off the table. Putting it back in, and you have it in both the holders on the top and the bottom below the table, it's going to be loose. Step one is to tighten the screw at the back until it doesn't wiggle in the holders anymore. So tighten and then check to make sure that it's not wobbly in the holders. And then the thumb screw on the front, air positioned to blow away our dust, and now we're ready to go. Piece so that the blade is not in contact with the wood at all for when you turn it on. Alright, I can see that I have some cleanup here to do on the left side, and since I have the blade right here already, I'm just going to shave it down with the blade. Have to get into that corner also. Alright, so you can see that I still have some waste on the beyond the line, so I need to shave that down, and then we'll get about testing to see the fit. Alright, that looks decent. Let's go test that fit. Alright, moment of truth. Let's see how we did in cutting these, because they need to match and fit. Ooh! It starts to go in, and there's enough give that I can wiggle it a little bit, but that's starting to feel kind of tight here, and I'm getting nervous. Alright, so if we look straight down there, there is a little tiny corner right there. That might be it. This guy right there. So what I'm going to need to do is get a 1/4 inch chisel, because this mortise is supposedly a 1/4 inch, and just pare that back ever so slightly. That should relieve the pressure, and maybe also get a file for this side, because that looks like that's bowing in there. I have to be very careful of doing this, because if I nick the corner, or if I rock the file at all, then I'm going to wear away the edge, and I won't have a nice tight square fit. All I really want to get is that one corner, so I don't need to bite too much, and I'll clear that out very gently so I don't cause any tear out on the back side. File, press it against this wall, and make sure that it doesn't rock. Just a straight shot, a couple of times. Probably don't need to take off all that much. All right, let's try this puppy. Oh yeah, there we go. That looks pretty good. Now we just need to check for square in all the right places. All right, I like that fit. Let's glue it. As usual, don't glue to the tabletop. Let's douse our tenon in glue. All the way around, spread it evenly, get it onto that shoulder, into the corners there. If you need to hammer it, get a scrap piece of wood to whap on the top so you don't hit your project directly. And then quick before it dries, check for square again to make sure you didn't stick it in there wonky. All right, I got some glue on my square. Wipe off the squeeze out. Now if you have a loose fit, you might need to clamp. Even if you have a tight fit, you probably should clamp. This is so tight, I didn't even need to glue it. I've got all my squeeze out here, and interesting, I don't have any squeeze out on this side. Well, that ain't going anywhere, so I can sign it and just let it sit